Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Inept General, and welcome to another Total War Warhammer news update. Today we had a stream from Creative Assembly going over the Bordeleaux faction in the upcoming Old World edition. So Bordeleaux, if you don't know, is a faction of Bretonnia who will be playable at the beginning of the campaign. They are led by Albric de Bordeleaux. Now, guys, just to give you a bit of a caveat here, today's stream was much less organized than yesterday's. They had James, the guy on the left here in the image, driving, whereas yesterday he had quite a sensible designer next to him, getting him to point out all the distinctive things about the Bretonnian faction rather than the Bordeleaux faction. Today he was kind of flying solo, and the designer they put with him wasn't of much help, really. So we didn't get as much information about Albric in terms of all of his upgrade abilities as we did yesterday with King Louan Leoncoeur. But I'll take you through some of the stuff we did find out. And I want to start with a personal highlight of mine, is a new feature they've added for the whole game, I imagine, to every faction, that when you kill a legendary lord, you get a very specific character trait to buff your own character. Now, I think that's a really cool addition that gives you a bit more incentive to hunt down and kill the Grimgors of the world, the Kazarak One-Eyes of the world, because each one of them will give you a specific new trait for whichever lord's army happens to have taken them out at the time. So I think that's a really cool new mechanic they've kept kind of quiet for now, but really looking forward to seeing that and hunting down Kazarak and Morgor and Malagor and getting all their unique traits for my generals. I think that'll be really cool. Next up, we had Albric's unique starting position. He actually starts on the ocean. Now, on a personal note, having done a video on potential naval battle in Total War Warhammer, I was a little bit disappointed at the rendering of this Bretonnian boat. It's a bit rubbish, but hopefully they won't make the boats look like that if they ever do bring in naval combat to Total War Warhammer. So Albric starts in the ocean for some unknown reason. Maybe, I have no idea why. There's no real law reason except that he's trading and there's a lot of ships in Bordeleaux, and that's about it. And he starts with a paladin rather than a damsel, which Louan starts with. So that's something maybe to bear in mind for your campaign, guys. Now, in terms of the skill tree, this is about all we saw. Now, there are some things that we can identify from yesterday in terms of sort of looking at the bottom row there. Route Marcher, we know. Justicar, we know, is a control buff from Luan's video. Bonded Service, we know what that is. Now, Yield of the Sea seems to be a unique thing for Albric, which is massive buffs to port income. I think the bottom tier there, which we saw during the stream, actually took it to about 150%, which is huge for port income. Now, in terms of the middle tier there, we have Aspiring Knights, which I imagine is a buff for Knights, and Champion of Bordeleaux, I imagine is a leadership buff for Knights, and the Aspiring Knights looks like a melee buff, probably a melee attack buff, if I was to guess from the icon. Chivalric Code we had with Louan, which is a charge bonus for Knights, I believe. Now, Albric does not start on a horse, unlike the king himself, which is a bit rubbish, but I suppose you could argue he started on a boat and didn't have his horse with him. You could maybe make that argument, but it would be a bit iffy. So, and he gets Lance of Bretonnia, which I imagine at the top row there is a charge bonus for Knights, because he seems to be all about buffing your Knights. That seems to be his main focus. Now, looking at him, you can see on the top left of his skill icon tree on this screen, he has a unique item, which is the Trident of Manaan. Now, during his lore video, I did speculate that they might give him a trident just because Manaan is the god of the ocean and one of the gods heavily worshipped in Bordeleaux itself, which is a kind of a unique trait of that dukedom. Now, this Trident is not modeled. The only time we saw Albric in a couple of battles today, he was only ever holding a sword and shield, but it's not a modeled Trident. Maybe when he gets a horse, they might switch it to a lance formation, and that lance might be modeled after a Trident, but we never saw him on a horse. We only saw him on the Pegasus and on foot. So or the Hippogriff, but in both those cases, he only had the sword and shield. So I'm not sure if they even bothered to model a lance. To be frank, I wouldn't put it past them not to have modeled a lance, which is a bit of a bummer. I'd have loved to see a Trident lance with Albric, but there you go. Now moving on, this is the second half of it. Again, a lot of stuff we recognize from Louan's upgrade tree. The whole second half of this really is identical to King Luon Leoncoeur's upgrade tree. So you can have a look at that video from yesterday in the top right hand corner. If you click on the eye icon, you can check that one out, and I go through what each of those ones do individually. So it looks like his only unique ones are that Yield of the Sea, Servants of Manaan, and the Night ones at the beginning of his middle tier upgrade tree there. So not a lot to differentiate him, but a couple of things just making him more unique to Knights. Now, he also has a unique buff, which I've maybe missed, which is the Tempest of Manaan, which I think gives him a charge bonus. But let me know in the comments if you guys have heard of that one or caught it. But I think that's what that one does, and it's just a unique buff to him, I believe, that he maybe confers to people around him as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one. And moving on, the Trident of Manaan itself seems to be quite a cool piece of kit, even though they didn't bother to model it. The melee attack +6, weapon strength +10, attrition -75% from the high seas. But how often do you take attrition like that in the game at the moment? Until they add in Ulthuan and the areas across the sea, no one really goes into the deep waters anyway. There's literally no need for it. And we have the ability Wrath of Manaan. Now, Wrath of Manaan is essentially Winds of Death that this guy can use, except that it does damage, magical damage, large area of effect, and causes Discourage, which is a -60 leadership buff. Now, you have to be careful using this, as was demonstrated later on in the stream, because your peasant front line is so rubbish morale-wise. Unlike Winds of Death, which will just cause your guys damage if you happen to hit them with an overlap of it, if you hit your own middle line of peasants with this thing, you can cause a mass rout of your entire army. So you need to be very careful using this as Bretonnia. It can cause you to lose your own fight, because if it sort of grazes off a few of your units in the front of your peasants, it won't do that much damage, but it'll essentially ruin their morale, and they'll just break, and it'll cause a mass rout of your army. So watch out for that. But it could be potentially devastating used in the right situations, but could cause a lot of self-harm. You get 3 uses of it per battle. That's what you're limited to, and it's not reliant on the Winds of Magic. So that's pretty cool and a quite unique little item. And the effect does look like a kind of mini tidal wave, so tidal wave even. So that's pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to using that in the map once I probably confederate with Alberic, I'll be honest. I'm not necessarily super keen on starting a campaign of him, but we'll get him eventually. Now, we also got a little bit of a look on the penalties in terms of going over your limit for the peasants. So the first tier of punishment seemed to be -30% from your farms, which in itself is not hugely horrible for Bordeleaux particularly, because they have a port that's a unique building that generates quite a significant amount of income, so they're not solely reliant on the farming aspect. The next tier up from that was -60% to farms in all regions. That's a little bit worse. And the next tier after that is when things start to get a bit harsh. -90% replenishment rate for non-knight units in your army, and -90% income from all farms. So it can get a little bit nasty if you really abuse that peasant cap, or not necessarily cap, soft cap, shall we say, that soft peasant cap in the game. Now, here, just looking at these 2 unique structures. Now, yesterday I pointed out that King Luon Leoncoeur has a unique structure to him in the campaign that he has. Now, Alberic may have a unique structure, but I did not catch them showing it off in this stream, because what they did was they skipped ahead to a later load, and there was no point, I think, where he had the opportunity to build a new building. So we never got to see if the unique legendary building for Alberic showed up, or what that might be. There is the 2 unique unit buildings here, which is the port and the unique winery for Bordeleaux. So those are already 2 unique buildings. Now, whether the port is unique to Alberic as his legendary building, I couldn't tell you. I suspect because there's going to be a port there anyway, it's not. And there's still yet 1 more legendary building that Alberic can build himself. So we'll have to wait and see what that is. Probably not till the release date now. They also mentioned that some YouTubers will be getting it over the weekend. I, unfortunately, am not lucky enough to be one of those. But do look out for some coverage, and they might be able to answer some of those questions for you there. And that about sums it up for today's stream. There wasn't really much news. We got to see the upgrade tree for the paladins, and essentially it's like an empire captain. You get the bottom tier, which is all about training your troops of exemplar and training. It looked very similar. Nothing unique really stood out to me. But that's about sums it up. So not a huge amount of news today, but a good little thing that I liked, particularly from today, was the idea of hunting legendary lords gets you unique traits for your lord and for his army. So that's a pretty cool little touch they put into the game, and looking forward to taking advantage of that. Thanks for joining me again today, guys. Do drop a like if you enjoy these news updates. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more, with some more lore videos, some more Total War Warhammer gameplay. And yeah, thanks again, guys. Have a great day.